Now let's take a closer look at the entire authentication workflow. At the very beginning, we have an MCP client. This could be the Postman, could be MCP Inspector or Cursor, and an MCP server, which is listening on port 3000. The MCP client initiates a post request to /MCP. If the MCP server doesn't require authentication, the request proceeds normally. However, if authentication is required, the server responds with a 401 unauthorized error code. At this point, the MCP client realizes it needs to authenticate first. It then sends a GET request to the well-known /OAuth protected resource, asking for the details of the OAuth server. The MCP server responds with the OAuth server's address, which is a localhost 3001. Okay, now the OAuth server is accessible to the MCP client. From this starting point, the MCP client is going to communicate with the OAuth server. The MCP client sends a post request to /register, requesting a client ID. Each session gets its unique client ID. The OAuth server responds with the client ID, and from here, the standard OAuth 2.0 workflow begins, which most developers are already very familiar with. First, the client calls /authorize with the client ID and the redirect URL. The OAuth server then attaches an access code to the redirect URL and redirects the client back. Now the client has an access code. The client then sends another request to /token, including the access code and the client ID. In response, it receives a bearer token, which is also known as access token. For all the subsequent requests, the client includes this bearer token in the HTTP header, and everything functions normally. You see, the server then responds with a 200 OK status. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ross, and today we are diving into a super interesting and incredibly practical topic, MCP authorization. Up until now, we have mostly used MCP for fun, for personal projects, or just to boost our own productivity. But have you ever thought about taking the one step further and actually putting your MCP server into production? If you are thinking about that, there's one thing you can't skip, which is MCP authorization. Without it, your server is never going to be production ready. I think everybody understands the reason why. In this video, I'll walk you through exactly how to build an authentication layer on top of your MCP server. We are going hands-on, step by step, so by the end, you will know how to get it done right. Without further ado, let's get started. This is the official documentation on MCP authorization on Anthropic's website. So while this documentation includes all the details and it's packed with a lot of information, however, it feels too long and it's going to be difficult to read from start to the end. So what we can do is just to ignore this documentation first. Let's just build a working sample. I think the best way to do this is just to go to some open source. This one is pretty good. So this one is MCP's TypeScript SDK, which also includes some very good examples. So we want to build a MCP server with authentication. So in the examples in the server, this folder, there are two files which I think very important. One of them is this one, demo in memory OAuth provider. So this includes a lot of things about the authentication server, which can be used by any MCP server. Another file is this, a simple streamable HTTP.ts. This one is just a normal, simple MCP server. Well, it is simple, but it perfectly captures all the key concepts of the MCP authorization. So let's just start running this simple streamable HTTP.ts and see how it can communicate with this demo in memory OAuth server. So if you take a look at the source code, you'll see this one actually calls the demo in memory OAuth, this provider. So this MCP server has all the functionalities about authorization. So this is something that we can start with. Okay, let's just get started. Okay, now let's jump into the VS Code. So what we can do for now is that we can clone the entire TypeScript SDK. This repo, I can clone it and then open it in VS Code. Yeah, I'm using cursor, but if you use VS Code, that's everything the same, right? Okay. So the first thing we're gonna do is we will do the npm install. Let's do this. Okay, it has been installed. Then let's take a look at the src and examples folder and server. These are two files we just mentioned. One is a demo in memory or auth provider, and this one is going to do all the authorization stuff, right? It's going to start a separate OAuth server, which can be leveraged by the simple streamable http.ts. And this one is a normal simple MCP server. But you see, this one is using the demo in memory, this OAuth provider, and to add an authorization layer on top of a simple streamable HTTP server. So let's just open both files, simple one, this demo one, okay. And I think you can run this one directly. So let's just do this. Let's run a simple streamable http.ts. I can run using bun. So we can debug it. I run this file. Yeah, I run this file. Yeah, just be aware, you're not running the demo, this OAuth provider, you're running this simple streamable, this MCP server. So run it, yeah, and from the console you'll see the MCP streamable HTTP server, yeah, listening on this port. At this moment, I don't think it's running with OAuth, because we didn't add this --OAuth, this parameter, but let's just take a look at some first. Okay, now my server is running on port 3000. And by the way, if you didn't see this bun debugging options like run file, like a bun, so you need to install a plugin, and this plugin is called bun VS Code, I think. Yeah, bun for Visual Studio. You need to install this one, and all these options will show up. So we are running on this port. Let's open our MCP Inspector. So that's the running server. At this moment, no authentication, but we can connect. So everything works well. As resources, as prompt, we have tools, we have everything. The server is running normally, it is good. And now we need to add the authentication stuff. So we need to pass this --OAuth, these options, to this simple streamable http.ts. To do this, we need to modify the launch.json, and we can just add a new command. So this one is debug file. We can use a name -OAuth. And here we need to pass the options. It automatically shows up. --OAuth, and this one should be good. We save it. Okay, you see a new option, debug -OAuth. I'm gonna start it. Yeah, so you see now it started two servers. One is O1 MCP server on port 3000. The other is authorization server, and this is on port 3001. So both are running, and we can come back to our MCP Inspector. Let's check the network traffic connected. Yeah, you can see the message successfully authenticated with OAuth. And so this means the authentication is passed because it's a simple authorization server. We didn't add any complex logic. Everyone can pass the OAuth, but it does show the entire workflow. To better understand the authentication workflow, I think it would be very helpful to use the Postman to run each step manually. Let's just get started by creating a REST API collection. Let's rename this one to the MCP auth workflow. I'll remove these three methods first. The first request we are going to send is just a normal /MCP host command. The base URL is the MCP server address, and this one, localhost 3000/MCP. Yeah, that's the first request. The request body, we can copy from Inspector. This should be initialized, this one. Copy, paste, I'll save the first request and send it. Okay, now you see the 4.1 unauthorized error. This is the first step we need to do. This is also mentioned in the opening video, the first request to initiate entire authentication process. Next step is called auth server discovery. Because at this moment, we still don't know anything about the authentication server. We don't know its address, so we need to send a GET request to MCP server asking for the details of the auth server. The base URL is still the same, localhost 3000 of the MCP server, but the endpoint is a little bit tricky. According to the documentation, let's search the auth discovery. This is a well-known OAuth protect the resource should be the endpoint. Yeah. We can just save it because the GET request, we don't need to put any details here. Okay, so see the response. This response contains a authorization server this field. So that's the address of the auth server. This field is also mentioned in the protocol. And you must use this one. Yeah, you must put this one into your MCP server. So this is step 2. Let's just rename this one as auth discovery. Okay, now we know the authentication server address. All the subsequent requests will be sent to this address. Step 3, also a post request. We need to send a request to register this endpoint. And now we are talking to the authentication server instead of the MCP server. So now it should be 3001. /register. To register, you need to send the request body to the post route JSON. You can still copy it from the MCP Inspector. At here, you see register. Yeah, you just copy the request. So you see a couple of fields. Redirect URI. This is very important because we are using MCP Inspector. So this is the URL of the inspector. The grant types and response types, this one I just fixed to be the same for every request. The client name and client URI, this depends on your app, right? Depends on MCP client. So these two are still associated with the MCP Inspector. Scope, this one is very important. At this moment, we just put MCP tools. Later on, maybe you can put MCP resource or MCP prompts. Let's just give it a go. I save it. Okay. So that's the response. Everything else are the same to the request, but we have a client ID. This one is important. You are going to use this one to finish the OAuth 2.0 authentication. Now with the client ID ready, we can do the OAuth authentication flow. And in Postman, you can prepare your OAuth 2.0 settings in your folder at this folder level, and all the requests under this folder will inherit the OAuth 2.0 setting. So in here, you can click the auth. So this auth type, we're going to use OAuth 2.0. And here you can prepare the configurations. The token name, I would say is MCP OAuth 2.0. Callback URL, the callback URL, you can copy from your inspector. Let's see the callback function. So it's callback. Yeah, you can just use this endpoint. Yeah, but in Postman, actually, you can use whatever. The auth URL, you can use this one. The token URL, just replace this one with token. Client ID from our environment variable. So it's MCP client ID. Secret, in a simple demo, MCP auth server, it does not verify the secret, so you can leave it empty. And the scope is now profile. The scope should be MCP tools. Remember, it's here. And that's the scope. We specify MCP tools. It could be anything. Testing here. I'm just use ABCD1234. Client authentication. Yeah, that should be client credential symbolic. Refresh token. You can leave it empty. It's here. Any other settings? Yes, here. We need to use authorization code with PKCE. Because PKCE is It's a more security layer on top of the OAuth. So it just uses a code verifier and a challenge code to make sure the request and response they match each other. The PKCE is required on the MCP protocol, this documentation. So here it's just mentioned PKCE at here. So let's generate the PKCE parameter. But at this moment, you don't need to care about it. You just use the PKCE. This one, when you enable it, it will automatically generate the code verifier and the challenge code. So I think that's it. We save it. Let's try to see if it works. Get a new access token. Yes. Authentication complete. Succeeded. And proceed. And then use the token. Yeah, I think it's working. So now we can try the localhost 3000 MCP this request again. We do it. Okay, so there's something missing. We need to put some headers here. So the header should be accept. We mentioned this one last time. So for the HTTP transport type, you need to add this JSON, application JSON, and text event stream. Those must be required. Let's save it. Do it again. Yeah, so this time it succeeded. So that's about it. Yeah, so it's working. Yeah, I think this one is just using SSE. Let me check because it sent a message, not a JSON body. Apart from initiate, we can call some other MCP commands. I'm gonna duplicate this request. For example, this one, this who's here. The endpoint should be the same, but the body should be a different JSON RPC payload. Let's just copy something from here. I remove this one and tools and this tools. So this one payload. Just copy this. You see here, beautify, and you see the method is tools/list. Call it. No session ID provided. Okay, it requires a session ID as well. Yeah, and the session ID is in the initiate. I think in the initiate header somewhere has a session ID. Yeah, MCP session ID, this one. So this one should be provided in this tool. In the header, you need to set MCP session ID here. Put the session ID, save it, run it, see that's the tools. Yeah. So here you see everything's working. It has schemas, has auto to schemas, name to greet, and a tool that sends different greetings with delays between them. So now with the Postman, we just went through step by step, and now we have a clear understanding of the entire authentication workflow. Next, we are gonna do something by ourselves. We're gonna modify our bun-db-mcp, that repository, to add the authentication layers on it. Yeah, let's just get started. Okay, now we are back to our old friend, bun-db-mcp server. That's the code repository. At this point, the server still doesn't have any authentication layer implemented. It's in the same state as it was at the end of last tutorial. And we need to modify the code to support authentication. But before doing that, we need to make some changes. I think the port number is 3100, which is inconsistent with the simple streamable HTTPS, which is the port number is 3000. Let's just use 3000 such that we don't need to modify our Postman settings. So we still use the same port number here. Anything else we need to change? Maybe no. Let's just start it. That's the first test it without authentication. We can do, we have script here. start HTTP. Okay, and do npm run start HTTP. And it's localhost 3000. Let's see. So if I do this, I should still see successful connection. Yeah, it's working. Okay, good. You see there's no 401, and because we haven't added any authentication stuff on it. Okay, and next we're gonna implement the authentication. One thing we have to do beforehand. So I think in last tutorial, for the HTTP transports, right, at here, and we're just using some native query server. You see it's just from native HTTP and Node.js to build the server, right? However, in the MCP TypeScript, this SDK, so everything is in the Express or Express-like servers, like Hono or whatever. And so we first need to refactor this http.ts to use the Express instead. And we can ask our old friend Claude Code to do this automatically. Okay. So let's just get started. So we first just need to copy this demo in memory OAuth provider, this file, to our bun-db-mcp server. So let's just create a new folder. Here, src. I'm gonna create a new one, auth. So the server, what's the name? It's demo in memory or auth providers. Yeah, we can use the same. Demo in memory auth provider.ts. Okay, it's here. Yeah. So there are many errors here, and because in the type SDK, so they are just using the relative import paths, right? But now we're using SDK, that should be corrected. And just remove this sort of thing. Now I started the Claude Code in a terminal. What we want to do now is just to modify the http.ts file to use the same way as what a simple streamable HTTPS file does. So I copy the path. And here, I'll provide some instructions to Claude. Mirror. So it's a very good word, mirror. So that's the full path of the simple streamable http.ts from TypeScript SDK. And this one, and modify the existing file here. So we copy the path. At the end, you notice that I also tell Claude Code to refactor the http.ts, not to use the query server from HTTP this package, but to use Expressway. Okay, I think Claude Code has done the job. So let's just test it. So let's first check what changes Claude Code has made for us. It modified the package.json. Yeah, it added dependencies for the Express and also the types. Yeah, the clause is also used by the Express. So that's the change. The biggest change here definitely is in the http.ts. It refactors the entire code to use Express to build a server, and it looks good. Let's just try to see if it'll work. Okay, now let's test how it works. Before testing, we need to modify our package script. So you see the debug HTTP and start HTTP. It doesn't have any OAuth options. We can just edit OAuth, and this one also, and OAuth. Okay, now it should work. So I can start using the debug HTTP. I start my server. Yeah, you see, and now it started two Node.js servers. One is a 3000. That's a normal MCP server. The other is the authentication server. Now let's just try to use Postman to see how it works. First, we're gonna call it initiate. Because we're using the same port, same server address, we can reuse this request. So I click send. It's a server error. Yeah, but this time something doesn't seem quite right because it should be 401 and authorized by the 500. Let's see what the problem is. So in http.ts, everything actually happens inside the token verifier. And when any request comes in, at the first is the call this function, verified access token. If it doesn't have any tokens, then the response.ok, this one would be false, right? And then gets thrown an error right here. So I think that's the problem because it's thrown an error, but this error is not a recognizable error by the authentication SDK. So we're gonna change this one to, I think it's called the invalid token. So invalid token error. Yeah, invalid token error. So let's restart the server. Let's try again. Yeah, this time it's for 1 unauthorized. Okay, so it means our MCP server is now having the authentication functionality. Let's try some other things like a auth discovery to see whether it works. Yes, it's working. And register, does it work? Let's do the registering. Yeah, it also works. Now let's try the auth workflow. We don't need to change anything, and because our MCP server and auth server are still using the same address, and we regenerate the access token. Good. It succeeded. Now next step is just to call it /MCP, this command again, because now we have the bearer token. And before doing that, we still need to copy the MCP session ID. So that should come in from initiate. Click send. Yeah, this time it succeeded. The headers has the MCP session ID. We just copy this one and paste it. And click send again. Yeah, it succeeded. So our bun-db-mcp is also working. One thing that feels a little bit annoying is having to manually copy and paste the MCP session ID every time. We can actually improve this by adding a prescript during the initiate this request. What we need to do is clicking the scripts, this tab, and in the post response, we can set the MCP session ID to the environment variable, similar to the client ID. So we can do the PM environment set, and this is the MCP session ID. And we can get this one from the response header, and PM.response. headers. So the header is, I think headers can have a get function. That's MCP session ID. This one. Okay. And now we can do the sender request. Yeah, MCP session ID is here. Yeah. It's now because we haven't authenticated yet. I think it's 4.1. Yes, 4.1. Let's do the authentication again. Okay, client ID is so client ID is now here. Let's see MCP client ID. This one is coming from the register. We register it. Now we call the OAuth this token again. Okay, succeeded. This token. And then we call it initiate. Yeah, it succeeded. And you see the MCP session ID, this environment variable is also accessible. Now in the list of tools, you just use the MCP session ID. This one. I save it. Now you don't need to copy and paste anymore. Yeah, it's working. There's something missing here. We initiate, which opens the MCP server connection. We should have another request to close the connection. So I duplicate this one. Rename this one to close. It's still the CP endpoint. We just need to use the delete HTTP method. You don't need to put any JSON payload. Okay. Let's just use this one. MCP session ID. So that should be fine. And I save it. And now I close it. Oh, still doesn't have a session ID. Yes. Now. This one work. Okay, I think the session just disappeared. Okay. Let's just try it again. Yeah, now I have session ID. And these tools, yes, works. And close. Yeah, this time it's working. And because it has been closed, now if you try to call a list of tools again, this time they should fail. Right? No longer has any session ID, and to make it work, you have to call the initiate this one to open the connection again. Yeah, I think that's a perfect authentication workflow. So next, we're gonna do something more interesting. This authentication workflow, step by step, is clear and you know how it works, but it's not gonna be very useful because you can always authenticate, right? Everybody can authenticate. What we want to do next is just to use the Google authentication OAuth 2.0 and add that authentication layer to our MCP server. We only allow certain users with a specific Gmail account to access our MCP server. Okay, now let's just do it. To use the Google OAuth authenticator, you need to access the Google GCP console. In Google GCP console, enter the API and services, enter the credentials. You need to create an OAuth 2.0 client IDs here. Here, I already created one, which is a test01. But if you don't have it, you need to create yourself. By clicking this create credentials, that should be fine. So at here, you would have the client ID and you will also have the client secret. You need to record this client ID and client secret into our code repositories.env file. You also need to create some callback URLs. So this one is from the MCP Inspector, and this one is also required. So this should be your MCP Authentication Server. Should be 3001. This one. I save it. Okay. And now with the client ID and the client secret at hand, we can modify our code. Now let's come back to our bun-db-mcp server. We need to add two new environment variables in the .env file. One is in Google client ID, and the other is Google client secret. So you just need to put these two environment variables from here, ID and secret. I just create a new secret. After that, and you can ask Claude Code to do the things for you, but it's always like that. Why not using Claude Code? We can just say refactor. I think that should be enough. That should be enough information for Claude Code to know what to do. And let's just give it a go. Okay, mission accomplished. Let's check how it works. Okay, I just realized Claude Code made an error in this file, in this Google OAuth provider, this new file. But it's very easy to fix. It's just some type error. Should be a string. Yeah, that should be fine. Now let's test it to see whether it works. I restart the server, debug-http. Yeah, still normal. 2 servers, 3000, alt server 3001. Let's come back to our MCP Inspector, and I can click the connect button. So this does not work. Maybe we need to restart this server because it's yeah, maybe something messed up. I'm gonna close this one. I restart the server. Yeah, it just takes a while, but not too long. No, this is the restarted MCP Inspector. I click connect. Yeah, see, it actually redirects. Now I choose my own Google Gmail account. Yeah, access this information, my email, and also my profile. So I click continue. Yes, I grant this permission. Something doesn't quite right. Internal server error. Okay, let's do some quick debugging. I added some breakpoints, especially on these two functions. Challenge for authorization code. This is required by the PKCE. You use the code verifier to verify the challenge code. This happens before the exchange authorization code. This just to use your access code to exchange for the access token. Let's see, I will start my debugger. I'm gonna call the function again, call this connect again. Authorize, this one is good. I think just for the token, yeah. At this point, it stops at a challenge for authorization code. So if I see this, yeah, this means we already get the Google authorization code, right? So the problem might be that we can't use authorization code to exchange for the bearer token. The codes, yeah, this is a map which only has one key and a value pair. So the value, the client is this one, and we have a state, yeah, something like that. Okay, we already know what the problem is. So the authorization code is the code from Google. However, in the codes, the key is the authorization code in our MCP authorization server. So these two do not match. I think that's probably, if I go here, still undefined. Fine. And then it just shows an error, and this error just causes the 500 internal server error. We need to fix the issue at here. So let's shouldn't use this authorization code to get the code. We can do something like this. This dot code is a map, so we can change it to array. Go from the code entries, key value pair. This one, value dot client must be the same as client. It's not for each. It should be fine. Yeah. Let's see whether we can find a matching record. So I copy this one to the debugger. Yeah. Okay, it's just here. Yeah, it should be this. Let's just close it. Let's gonna fix some. This should be fine. Now let's just restart and retry. Restart the server. Okay, the server has been restarted. So now I click connect button again. And I got the authorization code and come here again. Come here, code data. Yeah, now the code data is not null. That should be fine. Yeah, this has been passed. So the code challenge and this code is available. Yeah. Let's see. There's something else, and here the payload is here. So I disable the breakpoints. Yeah, it's authenticated. Let's just try it again. I disconnect and I connect again. I choose my Google Gmail account. Yeah, it's working. So now I can use all the functionalities of my bun-db-mcp server. Let's try the connection and connect. Yes, working, connected. Let's try the query. Select star from employees. Limit 5. Yeah, all the records are here. Yeah, at this moment it's working. But we want to add some more restrictions, right? At this moment, everyone who has a Gmail account can log in our MCP server. But I just want someone with name Ross in a Gmail to log in. I don't want other people to log in. So how to do this? To verify the Gmail is quite simple. If you take a look at the code, in the function exchange authorization code. So here, it's gonna have some user information in here. So this user information will contain the Gmail as name and whatever, you know. And after that, you see it just passes the user information, email and name to this payload. Right? We can set another breakpoint at here, and we do some reconnect. I'm using my Gmail address. Let's challenge. Just ignore it. Yeah, that's user info. And we come to here and you check the user info, and you see that's my email address and that's my name. And you can use this one to do authentication, right? So if the email and name does not satisfy your condition, you just throw an error. So it's gonna be very easy to add some more filters. Okay, and now let's see whether we can use Postman to authenticate using the Gmail account, right? It actually works in the same way. Because we didn't change any server address, right? So we don't need to modify anything with our Postman requests. Still, the first thing we need to do is to acquire the client ID. So let's call the register. Yeah, now we have the client ID as here, this one. And now we do authentication. So we come here on the OAuth page, and all these settings we don't need to change. So we just click get a new access token. Yeah, so it pop-ups the Google screen, and that's my Gmail account. That's my password. Yeah, so that's the consent screen. I agree. I can grant all the permissions, my email address, my personal info. Allow. Right, let's come to here. And I know this will pass, okay? Disable all the breakpoints. Yeah, authentication complete. It should work. I use the token. Now I can call it initiate this request. Send. Okay, now the MCP session ID is here. Right, and now I can do whatever I want. On the MCP server, I can list the tools. Yeah, that's all the tools. So Postman is working in the same way. Okay, let's wrap up at here. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, giving it a like, and clicking the notification bell so you won't miss any future updates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.